Well, welcome everybody to a new winter approach. I hope you've enjoyed the presentations and roundtables during the week. So we have over the last couple of years, we've been approaching the solar cycle minimum. Where are we now on the solar cycle, and how does this affect our winter? So Cassie, over to you.
Hi, yeah, so I'm going to answer this question. So kind of just following on from Brendan's presentation with our long range forecast. He highlighted in his presentation that we're at the bottom of the solar cycle at the moment. The last time we were at the bottom was in 2010, and I'm sure that is in everyone's memory, that winter in particular. I mean, even if you cast your mind back to exactly 10 years ago today, or a couple of days ago, we had already experienced the first snow of the season, and it was a UK-wide snow, and that was the last time we were at the solar minimum. And I mean, even that was the first snow of many snow events to see that particular season. But yeah, as I was saying, we're at the bottom of the solar cycle at the moment. And what does this mean? This usually means that the stratospheric tropical pole temperature gradients tend to be smaller than normal, which in turn leads to being a more buckled jet stream. Whereas when we're in the high sunspot cycle or at the top of the sunspot cycle, we tend to see more of a power in the jet stream, and you get the more Atlantic driven systems, which Bren mentioned, and you tend to get the mild conditions. Whereas when we're at the bottom, we tend to get more buckled jet stream, which increases the blocks that we get across the country, and then you can see that we get the cold winters. That being said, there are many other factors which play a part in determining what the winter weather looks like, and as Bren already mentioned, there are a few others that are contradicting what usually happens at the bottom of a solar cycle at the moment. So as Bren pointed out in his long range forecast, it's not always what happens in the solar cycle that plays a part in the weather we have here in the UK as well during the winter. Richard, was there anything else you wanted to add to that?
No, I think that's fine. Thanks, Cassie.
Okay, can we have question 2, please, Gemma? How often are the seasonal models updated, and do you provide any updates to the long range forecast? Again, Cassie, could you answer that?
Yeah, of course, no problem. So yeah, the seasonal models, we get the updates through to those towards the end of the first week of each month, and then the MetDesk, who specialise in writing our long-range forecast, will analyse those models and update the forecast or long-range forecast based on those. So we tend to issue a long-range forecast update during the second week of each month that are available. I mean, if anyone wants to hear more about those, then obviously please feel free to speak to myself or Richard, and we can look into that for you.
Thank you very much. And question 3, we're thinking of using route-based forecasting as we believe we will save money this way. How would you recommend we make that transition? And I do believe, Richard, you're looking at this question.
Yes, I can pick up with that. I think, route-based forecasting, and this is essentially where you treat or you go out gritting on a route-by-route basis rather than going across a whole area. It's not suitable for everybody. I think if you are looking at making that transition, it's really important to look at how you currently operate and whether or not you can adapt in order to, rather than sending all your vehicles everywhere, that, can you adapt so that you're only sending, one vehicle along a route, for example, because, there are implications in terms of logistics, but also, sometimes you need to consider the workforce as well, because you do sometimes see situations where, you have difficulty retaining drivers if they're not getting the work, because, potentially with route-based forecasting, you're reducing the number of routes that you're going to go out and treat. So that's one thing to consider. The next thing to look at, it's probably worth looking at the climatology of your overall area as well as part of the process. So revisiting the climatic domains, and if you are able to design your routes so they fit within something which is sensible from a climatological point of view, then you stand a better chance of being able to identify slighter variations within those climatic domains. So you can do that as well. You don't have to do it, but I think it does help if you do that. And also look at where your weather stations are positioned as well. You can adopt route-based forecasting by not changing the position of the weather stations, but if you're doing a review of all your operations, which I'm assuming you would do if you're moving to route-based forecasting, then you may want to look at including the position of the weather stations or how many weather stations you have as part of that overall process as well. So it is a relatively straightforward process to follow, but it's probably worth you speaking with your forecast provider, whoever that may be, to get their input, and they can certainly help you as part of that transition.
Thank you for that, Richard. And on to question 4, please. In recent years, since the introduction of Appendix H, we have been triggering treatments on a +1 forecast. Do you have any thoughts on reducing the treatment trigger to +0.5 or lower? And how can we build this into our risk-based approach? And I think, Richard, you're taking that one up.
Yeah, I can do. Again, what we saw when Appendix H came in, we did notice that a number of local authorities were going out treating on a +1 when perhaps previously they would have been going out on a +0.5 degree or even on a 0 forecast. I remember that first season there were quite a lot of I wouldn't say complaints, but a lot of comments from local authorities in particular saying, well, we're finding that we're using far more salt now than we were in previous years. And I think that was partly one of the things that contributed towards it. Since then, with the introduction of a risk-based approach, we have seen also, some local authorities approaches saying, well, what can we do to look at, both the forecasting side and also what transpired as part of the process of, looking at the treatment regime and whether or not they can safely go out on a +0.5 degree forecast. One thing I would, recommend doing is looking at the data, both the forecast data that you've had in previous seasons and also the observed values from the weather stations to see if, had you have gone out at a lower threshold, not necessarily 0.5, but a lower threshold than you're currently going out at, would that have increased the risk profile, in actuality, or up to what point can you change that risk profile so that it's acceptable? I think, again, there are operational considerations here, because if you're treating on a +1, there's that comfort factor there where you can, go to bed and have a decent night's sleep, and there's less chance of you being woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning saying, well, actually the temperatures have gone below 0, below 0.5 when they weren't expected to do that. So it is doable, but again, work with your forecast provider as part of that process, because they'll have the information regarding the forecast and the observed values as well.
Thank you very much for that, Richard. And could we move on to question 5, please? We are thinking of installing some lower cost weather stations as filler stations. Do you believe we will get value for these from these in the forecast? And I think,
okay, I'll pick up with that as well if you want, Steve. That's an interesting one. I think it's always useful to get more ground truth from a forecasting point of view. It is. I think the more ground truth you've got, the more potentially the more data that you've got to verify your forecast and also use it as a driver. I think the key here, or a couple of keys really, is where you locate those weather stations. We on some of the previous presentations we've had over the last few days, we've been talking about cycleways and footpaths. I think location of the weather stations is important. Again, speak to your forecast provider, because they can actually help you in terms of locating them, and also be clear as to what you want your forecast provider to do with that data. Again, talk to them, because the more data points you have along the network, do you want your forecast provider to be monitoring that data and alerting on it, or do you just want those sensors to be there almost in a passive type of role? So it's worth understanding how that data is going to be used, and also how on the client side, how you would react to the information that's being provided to you as well. So So yes, in a nutshell, yes, having more ground truth is useful, but just be mindful of how you're going to use that data moving forwards.
Thanks, Richard. Gemma, I don't know if we have any further questions that have come on the chat line, or can't see any hands up from anybody. So
Yep, we had a question from Sean, and he's asking, how do you think forecasting will develop over the next 5 years, and how will it benefit decision makers?
Do you want me to pick up with that, Cassie? Yeah, okay. I think when you look at sort of trends at the moment, I can only sort of comment from our perspective, but we're seeing an increase in the number of clients who are moving to route-based forecasting. There's also an increase in terms of clients identifying gaps on the network, either on their own or in conjunction with ourselves, and filling those sort of data gaps. I think also as we start losing expertise from the industry, and I'm talking here about sort of people, retiring, those people who've been decision makers for, 20, 25 years, are gradually retiring. I think there's going to become a greater reliance on, decision support tools, whatever they may be. I think perhaps you may well see, more conservative decision making taking place as well as a result of, that expertise leaving. So I think a number of things could change. We also have this, autonomous vehicles which are going to come at some point. So, we need to be mindful of how would an autonomous gritting vehicle interact with the forecast and any sort of updates to that and any data that's out there. So, and also things like the Internet of Things, more data points. You start looking at neural networks and using data from vehicles, things like when windscreen wipers get switched on and off to indicate as to whether or not it's raining, things like traction from the tires to try and indicate if it's slippy or not. There's lots of exciting things on the horizon to consider. So hopefully that's answered the question.
no, thank you very much for that. Gemma, do we have any further questions?
Nope, nothing else.
Sean has his thumbs up, so that looks good. I don't know, Mark, did you want to add anything to today's event?
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, no, I think we've obviously got a lot of participants on the session at the moment. Obviously, we've got the panel that have answered all the questions that we've had during the session, and a few that we've just picked up there. I don't know if anybody else wants to come in to support Richard and Cassie there, or if anybody else has got any further questions they want to bring up now, or quantify any of the answers that have been provided by our panel, then please put your hands up or shout up.
No, doesn't look as though we've got any further participants. I don't know, did you want me to close now, Gemma? Is that okay with you?
Yeah, I think, Mark, should we just hand back to you quickly just to say thank you to everyone for the week and for the support that people have given us?
Yeah, just before I do that, is there anybody else on the panel that want to pick up on any of the other questions, or we're all good? If everybody's all fine with that, then I'd like to say, thank you very much for all the attendees that are obviously joining through the sessions during the week. We really hope it's been of benefit. We will be following up, any of the questions that we've been given during the week. We'll make sure that all the videos and these particular sessions will be available, that Gemma will share later on. And I'd just like to thank all our panel for assisting during the week, and a big thank you to Gemma for hosting the events during the week as well. So thank you all very much.